Christians will tend to do is that they will tend to tiptoe through the tulips. They will try and deflect from the situation. They will try and do anything that they can to really run around the situation or the problem of the atrocities that Christianity has played with a lot of us as black people. You got to be very specific on what entity or power you are talking to. And Christians, they don't mind calling God God for whatever reason. They don't. God knows when I am talking to him, really. So I guess you don't mind that I call him Beelzebub. It's even more disturbing that a lot of these Christians come on my page and for whatever reason they don't see the goddess or the feminine aspect in God. And like they were extensions of our power. So we created gods and goddesses as personifications of forces within that I did. So I believe this is going to be episode 96. And I only want to make this a podcast episode only because I want to really have this on audio for like people to listen to, you know, when you're on your phones and you're on Spotify and stuff like that. And also because I feel like this is just some very insightful information that a lot of people just don't know about when it comes to religion and the gods and goddesses and all this other type of stuff. So I'm gonna just try and get through it. And then if y'all have questions and stuff, or y'all want to put in input and stuff like that, I'm going to try and put it in the information that I'm talking about as I go along. I won't be stopping as much. So for people who are coming in and you feel like I might be ignoring you or something like that, I'm not trying to ignore you. So I'm just giving out that disclaimer. It's just that I got to get out the information or whatever I have in mind because I will lose my place. Okay. So whenever I put it out and whenever I'm in my zone and stuff like that, if I see your comment and stuff like that, don't think I'm ignoring it. Okay, I'm just getting into the feels of it. But I believe this is episode 96. I will be putting 95 together soon. I had recorded that back when I was on vacation last week. But I want to make this podcast episode because a lot of people, I've been getting a lot of comments and a lot of DMs and stuff from a lot of religious fanatical Christians, because a lot of people feel like that I am either trolling or I am an agent of the devil, or that I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't do my research. I don't be reading books. I don't be well educated. And for those who have been following me know that I have a whole plethora of books and information, and I have been talking about this type of stuff I've been into the occult stuff for about 4 years, but I've been talking about Jesus and all this other type of stuff for a good 6 to 7 years. So I've been very well aware of the mythology of Christ. Why? Because the mythology of Christ did come from Africa. For those who come on my page and they talking about Christianity was in Africa. You didn't know that, Tyrone? It was in Egypt. It was in Ethiopia. Yes, because the mythology of Christ came from that place. If you are willing to admit that Christianity was first in Africa, you also have to admit that Christianity was a myth and that it was inspired. The story of Christ was inspired by the stories and the myths and the legends of the gods within those areas, like Haru. Literally. So the whole story of the Trinity of the Father, the Mother, and the Son is the same aspect that you see with Jesus. A lot of the aspects and elements that you get from Greek mythology and from Egyptian mythology reside within the Jesus stories. That's why a lot of the philosophical terms and references that you see when you see certain terms and stuff in the Bible, and you recite Greek terms of certain things like kingdom of heaven, or dealing with the Lord's Prayer. That's the posture of Noster Pater. I believe that's how you say it, the Noster Pater. And just all these different types of things that you could really study into the Bible. The Book of Psalms, you could really cite that to the hymns of what's his name? Atanakin, one of the pharaohs. I know I botched his name, so I do apologize for that. But a lot of the things that you see in the Bible are either referenced or inspired by older scripts and older scrolls from previous civilizations. And they're not original in the aspect of its own type of ideology, but because there were other civilizations of people who already had these type of stories. And so just because you have a new civilization that comes into place and then they create their own mythology and their own stories doesn't mean that it was original. And what Christians would tell you is that never before have there ever been a man that have been the Messiah and a savior and saved the whole world. And that's just very intellectually dishonest, because there are so many stories of heroes and Christ figures and messiahs if you truly study mythology. As a matter of fact, by the same author, Dr. John G. Jackson, he has a book called The Pagan Origins of the Christ Myth, which is a great book. I highly recommend that you read that. But this book right here, Christianity Before Christ, and I'm going to show it for the people who, when I put this on YouTube, Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson. He is a black man who was a scholar. And what Christians will tend to do, especially black Christians, the Negroids, what they will tend to do is try to discredit black people who are scholars because they give them the information. They will do some extra work on a black man when it comes to credibility. For whatever reason, we don't see any type of real credibility when it comes to our black scholars, but we'll take the white man's information with no questions asked. But anyways, Dr. John G. Jackson did his due diligence and his research, and you can go to the bibliography, you can look at his sources and cite them for yourself, and he dates all the major Messiah or Messianic gods and compare them to Jesus. So the reason why it's called Christianity Before Christ is because there were different aspects of ancient civilizations that already had messianic figures before Jesus had came into the picture. Somebody said, why is that? Why is what? The intention of religion is to stop you from radical thinking. Well, yes and no. I'm going to say yes, it's true on a surface level, but the original purpose for religion was for order and preservation. When you study civilizations of people, everybody had their own religion. Everybody had their own spiritual system. And somebody had asked me, I believe yesterday, if they have this aspect of God, wouldn't they want to share this aspect of God with the world? And the answer is no, because when you study westernization, they wanted to control people. And when you're dealing with indigenous people, we did not have the nature or the passion to control people. We were not savages. We were not chaotic like that. We were not Caucasoids. We didn't have this passion of wanting to control the world and wanted to control masses of people and wanted to spread all this tyranny. That's what the Greeks and the Romans did. You see what I'm saying? And so they just put that into their Christianity, put that into their religion, tried to make it look all nice and stuff. And so before they would colonize or terrorize a certain land, they will always bring the missionaries first with peace and love and Jesus, and then that's when the tyranny will come. That's when the colonialism will come. And so those things have to be recognized, because what Christians will tend to do is that they will tend to tiptoe through the tulips. They will try and deflect from the situation. They will try and do anything that they can to really run around the situation or the problem of the atrocities that Christianity has played with a lot of us as black people. And the thing is that us as African descent people, I had asked a question, right? And maybe I had to be more specific, but we are West African descent people. And so I had asked them, why do I have to serve Jesus when my ancestors already had an ancient, highly advanced spiritual system where they already had contact with the Creator, with the Most High, with the Supreme Intelligence? And they did everything that they could to not answer that question. The only way that we were introduced to Jesus was through slavery. And for whatever reason, black people have an issue trying to understand that because of Ethiopia and Egypt, which merely makes up 5 to 10% of Africa. But your ass ain't Egyptian and your ass ain't Ethiopian. Even more so, you don't have an Ethiopian or one of the original books to even get context on that. And even if you wanted to, you don't even deem credible of the Apocrypha, which the Ethiopians also have in their old books. But you don't read that because you don't care about that. You will only use that as a defense mechanism to try and basically deflect from the real issue, which is your black ass didn't need Jesus. Now, this is not to discredit Jesus. This is not to discredit the story of Jesus. This is not to discredit who Jesus is in terms of the mythology of it, because it did come from our own mythology. But it's to say that when we're dealing with Jesus, when we're dealing with the mythology of Jesus, it needs to be understood that we were given Jesus as a way of weakening us because we had different sources and different connections with the divine source, with power, with nature, that the Europeans didn't. And if you don't believe me, study the Haitian Revolution. We used the powers of nature, which we call voodoo. That's all voodoo is utilizing the power within nature. We utilize the powers of nature, connecting with nature, connecting with the Most High, with the One, in order to triumph over the oppressors. And yet Christianity will tell you that our ancient civilizations who practiced these rituals and these practices and these systems were pagan and savages and heathens. And that it took Christianity. I literally had this Hispanic man tell me that Christianity civilized us. It civilized us. Yeah, because Christianity has a wide history of civilized. Can't even talk right now. Civilizing black folk. Oh yes, because Christianity has just a major history of accomplishments of civilizing indigenous people. And I'm being sarcastic for people who are not getting the gist. But I want to read a couple of these comments. Somebody said, why will take Master word, but not our own kind? I think you need to rephrase that. Somebody said, are you atheist, bro? No disrespect, just asking. No, I'm omniist. That is what I am. I am the omniist Rome. Now, because I am omniist, I look at different aspects and different philosophical standpoints. So a lot of my standpoints might sound like an atheist, or they might sound like a Hindu, or they might sound like a Christian on some occasions, or it might sound like a Luciferian, whatever the case is, because I am willing to look at all different aspects of truth. So I'm not atheist, even though atheism has a lot of good standpoints when it comes to religion and spirituality. But I do know, and I will say I do know and have knowledge of there being a God or a supreme intelligence. Someone said no nature is imbalanced due to capitalism. Somebody else said, I agree with understanding that there was a belief system our ancestors had before Christianity. Right. And to get into that, before we even go any further, before I lose track, I want to get into my first aspect of why we created the gods and goddesses and stuff like that, right? And so, mind you, I need to finish this fruit here because it's going to go bad in the next couple of days. So throughout this live stream, if I do start to chunk on some of this cantaloupe and these watermelons, because I just need to get rid of it, that's all. But anyways, a lot of people do not have an understanding of what the gods and goddesses were created for. And the only reason for that is because a lot of us don't understand what is a god and what is a goddess. And the only reason why is because we were given a very vague and diminishing understanding or term to what is a god, to such an extent that we were given such a vague and fragmented understanding of God, is that we were given the term God to refer to God, which doesn't make any sense to me at all, because how would you refer to the Most High, to the supreme essence, as God when God isn't even a name? God is referencing to a power. You know what I'm saying? It's referencing to what a particular entity or a being is, but that doesn't mean that God is a name. Now, that's one of the big issues that I have when it comes to the Eurocentric and westernized perception of God or the supreme essence, because you got to be very specific on what entity or power you are talking to. And Christians, they don't mind calling God God for whatever reason. They don't seem to question it or even really think past it, because it's God. God knows my heart, and God knows when I am talking to him, really. So I guess you don't mind that I call on Beelzebub to get in contact with God, because God knows my heart. God knows who I'm talking to. So if I call on Beelzebub, God will surely answer my prayers, right? No, that's not how that works. No, you can't call him Beelzebub. Beelzebub is the prince of demons. Oh, that's interesting. So now we got to be specific with who we're calling on. So how do you know you're calling on the God that you're calling on by calling him God? Do you know where the term God comes from? Do you understand the etymology of the word God? Do you know that God is a Germanic word that comes from Norse mythology? But you're calling on God. And they don't know about this because they don't study, and they will just take things for face value. And so it doesn't make sense for you to call on God when God isn't his name. His name. It's even more disturbing that a lot of these Christians come on my page, and for whatever reason, they don't see the goddess or the feminine aspect in God. And they will come on my page telling me that God don't need a wife. What if God don't need a damn wife? He don't need a damn son either. But he's God. He could do whatever he wants. Just sounding stupid, bro. How you gonna tell me God can do whatever he wants? God doesn't need a wife, but he needs a son. That don't make sense to me. How are you going to tell me that God doesn't need a wife, God doesn't need a counterpart, but he needs an offspring? The only understanding that we could have of there being a father and a son is that if there's a mother. If we see a little child that is lost, what is the first thing we're going to ask that child? Where is your mother? Where is your father? How are you going to have the divine son God and not question where his mother is? That don't make sense. I mean, they're playing the okie doke in the comment section. Like, if you go on my reels that are really like directly talking about the mother goddess, they are playing games in the comment section. Because you can't have a father without there being a reference to a mother and a son. But what the westernized, what the Europeans have done is that they have taken out the mother. Because if you study up on Roman, European, Greek history, they did not like women. I've literally read in books, literally studying pre-modern European history, that the European men only saw their women for sexual reproduction, well, for sexual pleasures and desires, and for reproduction. That's all they were good for. And all they did was just take that culture, take those values, and put it into Christianity. And that's why you have all this purity culture and modesty and thinking women are impure and everything of that sort, and believing in this mythology of because of Eve, now all women are essentially the gateway to everything that is impure. It's ridiculous. So the woman is God? No, the woman is not God. She is a goddess. She is a reflection. See, let's deal with what the gods and goddesses are, because that's what I was going to get into, right? So we created gods and goddesses to be personifications of divine feminine and masculine energies within ourselves. There is a power within man that cannot be duplicated, imitated, or replicated. I want y'all to hear me. There is a power within man that cannot be duplicated, imitated, or replicated. And there is a power within woman that cannot be duplicated, imitated, or replicated. And I don't need no he, she's, or she, he's, or it's, or ma'ams, or sirs trying to come on my page telling me otherwise. A man cannot be a woman, and a woman cannot be a man. That might sound controversial in 2024. I'm just telling you like it is. If you were made to be a man, you need to fulfill your will, do what thou will, and fulfill the purpose of you being a man. If you are a woman, fulfill the purpose of who you are as a woman, whatever that may be. But it's not to be the other person. Because if you were meant to be the other person, you will be the other person. But I was a man in my past life. We got a schizophrenic person on I. That might trigger some spiritual people that believe that they were living past lives. I personally don't believe in that, but That's neither here nor there. I won't dispute or go back and forth with those people. But whoever you were in your past life is who you were in your past life. If that's what you believe in. You are a woman now. You are a man now. So it is time for you to fulfill the purpose that you were meant to fulfill as that man or woman. Sir, ma'am, it. Okay? Whatever it is. Whoa. Things are falling. Somebody said women are literally a portal. How do you hate a portal? Because when dealing with the Greeks and the Romans, and I'm gonna get into what the gods and goddesses were supposed to be personified as and what they were meant for. But just to answer that question, what I've heard from Dr. Barashango, if you don't know who Dr. Barashango is, let me get my book. Another book. All right. So for those who are watching, if you want to screenshot this is another great book, another great reference. This is the book that put me on game to the goddess concept of spirituality. So this is African Woman, the Original Guardian Angel by Dr. Barashango. All right, this is what the man, another black man, another black scholar, mind you, another black man. And I know there are going to be some Christians trying to downplay his credibility and his information. He got a bibliography as well, saying you could study up on his information. He has a lot of good books. But this is the book that put me on game. African Woman, the Original Guardian Angel. I got a whole library, yo. I need to set me up like a bookshelf or something. But this is a great read. And like somebody said in the comment section, they had to reread on that. It's a great book. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. This book basically goes into depth on the mother goddess aspect of the Godhead and spirituality. But Dr. Barashango said in one of his lectures that the European hated the woman so much because he wanted to be like her. And because he could not be like her, he had to suppress her and diminish her to being inferior. And when you study history, there are many atrocities that European men have done towards women. This back and forth. And that's what the birth of the feminist movement was about. War between man and woman. That was never a thing when it came to African descent people. We upheld our women to such a high stature. When you study spirituality, when you study mythology, it was the man right beside the woman right beside the man. It's only when you get to studying Christianity and Islam and Judaism, you don't really see the man and the woman side one another. And if you do, it's really undersurface. It's really like layers that you have to peel back in order for you to really see that aspect in the Bible. You know, you have to really study the mysticism and the metaphors and the Hebrew language and what's feminine and masculine, because it's never on the surface level. Somebody said Jesus is king. We don't deal with that negativity over here. I'm sorry. Yeah, you might be on the wrong live stream for that one. I'm sorry. We don't deal with that type of negativity over here. And we definitely do not repent and give our life to any gods and goddesses. Which brings me to what I was going to talk about, right? Because gods and goddesses, well, that's some good cantaloupe. Gods and goddesses were created as they were extensions of our power. So we created gods and goddesses as personifications of forces within our traits and within our emotions. And so that's why there was a god of war, a god of happiness, a god of prosperity, a god of sex, we have all these different gods and goddesses, a god of love, a god of hate. And basically all the gods and goddesses they were extensions of our ego. They were personifications of our lower selves or in our demonic selves. They were personifications and extensions of our higher self. And so all the gods and goddesses are just extensions of us, and the gods and goddesses are those that dwell within us as well. And so something that I love from American Gods, if you haven't seen American Gods, it's a great series. I highly recommend that you watch it. But Odin was talking to Shadow Moon, and Odin had told Shadow Moon, like, which came first, the gods that the humans believed or the humans that believed in the gods? And it's a trick question, because you would think that, okay, the gods were created by the humans, but then again, the humans were the ones that eventually began worshiping gods. And both are true. Because the gods and goddesses are just extensions of humanity, and it is humanity that give the power to the gods and goddesses. What happened is that there was an okie doke, because the gods and goddesses, instead of them being helpers and extensions of humanity, humanity began to be obsessed with the gods and goddesses to such a point that they began to make them superior. And so what you see in American gods is that the gods and goddesses, the old gods, are now losing power because humanity has stopped believing in them. And the new gods are now coming to the foreplay, and they're not just any old type of gods. The gods are not like a new god of war, a new god of love. The new gods is technology. The new gods is Medea. The new gods is the things that are now gaining the attention and the attraction of the masses of the people today. And so the gods either have to basically have to re-transform, if I can even say it like that. They have to basically either create a new form or they will fade away. They have to find a new way of being relevant, or otherwise they just hold no relevancy. And what's worse than a dead god is a god that's forgotten, because they might as well be dead, right? And so that's basically the whole scene that you see going on with the American gods and stuff of that nature. But the gods and goddesses were created as extensions of man. And what religion was there for throughout different civilizations and different ethnic groups and different cultures and tribes is that it was created for there to be some form of culture, some form of stability, some form of preservation of a framework, basically creating a framework for people to have a place and to have a scenery to where they can express and expand their spirituality. And they would encode science and all these different aspects and elements of nature, even when dealing with the anatomy of man, within these stories. And when it came from, at first, these stories were just told orally. So they were told from generation to generation, and they were told by the tongue. And then when man started to write down these books, then you started to have ancient texts. And so that's where you have the Bible and the Vedas and the Torah and the Talmud and the Kabbalah and so on and so forth. And so you had books that basically were mystical stories, mystical folk tales that were encoded with science, encoded with metaphysics and mathematics and sacred geometry. But what had happened is that the upper or the higher ups or the elites took advantage of that. And mind you, nobody had hands on a book on the Bible until the 1600s. I want y'all to really understand that. Masses of people didn't even really have hands on a Bible up until the 1600s. So before then, nobody was reading the Bible. Like, you have access to the Bible now. You could just go on Google and you could read your little Bible and your little King James and your Amplified and your New International and your New Trent. You didn't have that 500 years ago, 600 years ago. You had to go to church and just hear these stories. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't have a Bible up on the top shelf and you would go home and read it with your family. You would hear it from the priest, from the pastor. And if you was to question any of the information that they would give you, it was off with your head. This is facts. So when you come on my page and telling me I need to read my Bible and I need to get back in touch with the Lord, well, I need you to understand that nobody even had real hands on the Bible. And even on top of that, when we're dealing with just the average society during that time, everybody wasn't illiterate. Or everybody wasn't literate. Everybody couldn't read. So it wouldn't even have made sense for them to have a Bible, for some of them. Oh boy, we got another Jesus person in here. The one and true God is the Heavenly Father. Point is the devil on earth. Even prove that God in Christ is real. It's us that like to play. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know what that means. You might need to rewrite that one. But nobody had a Bible up until they started to print out the Bible. When they started to print out the Bible, I believe that was in the 1500s or the 1600s, is when they started to print out the Bible and people could get hands on a Bible. And one of the popes during that time was like, this is going to ruin, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was saying, I think his name was Pope X. He was like, this is going to ruin the fable that we have created about Christ. He said that. Thank you. Somebody said the 1500s. He said, this is going to ruin the fable that we have created about Christ. And I just need y'all to really understand the brainwashing and the mind games that they have played with Christianity and that they have played onto you. And I need you to truly understand and really come to terms with who you are and understand that you don't need a God to worship. You don't need a religion to submit your life to in order to be a good citizen. You were not born a sinner. You were not born impure. You were not born to deserve eternal punishment in a place that would burn you and consume you and tear you apart forever and ever. That alone is the ingredient for destruction and low self-esteem. Could you imagine living in a society that would tell you that all your worth is just to be a low down, dirty sinner? That is traumatic. Could you really get upstanding, well enlightened citizens from that type of ideology? The ideology in itself within the church is setting you up for defeat. That because you need somebody outside of yourself to save you and to guide you, you then in society cannot control yourself. You then in society cannot lead yourself. So you need somebody outside of yourself, outside of your everyday life, to tell you what to do. That's what it does. That's what Christianity does in the church, because they tell you you need a savior. You need somebody to save you and to guide you and to lead you, even outside of your everyday life, as above, so below, as within, so without. You can't manage your own life. Creating a job, being an entrepreneur, you can't do that. Why you think there's a small percentage of entrepreneurs? Why you think there's a small percentage of people who will actually take control of their own life? Out of the masses of people, I believe there's only 1%. There's only 1% in the world that really have the big bucks. Why? Because the masses, the sheep, I don't even want to know why you would like to be referred to as sheep. Because Jesus says that my sheep hear my voice. I don't even know why you want to be referred to as a sheep, because sheep are the most gullible animals that there is. I'd rather be the goat. That's another story for another day. But this society has taught you to be sheep instead of you thinking for yourself. And it's because they have taught you to be sheeple that you won't ask the questions that need to be asked and answered. And you feel content because what Christianity does is that it gives you a sense of stability and comfort. But yeah, you don't need to look for somebody outside of yourself to save you, to guide you, to lead you as an individual. And what Christianity has done, what the church has done, is that they have made you to be dependent. And I want you to notice that when you're dealing with Christianity, you always notice, I want you to notice anytime that somebody gives you their testimony as a Christian, they were always at their lowest. They was always at their lowest when it came to Christianity. And whenever they met Jesus, I was on the verge of just ending life altogether. I was trying to find everything and nothing could satisfy me until I met Jesus. And you really have to really study that, because when people are at their lowest, they are at their most gullible. They are the most gullible in that moment. They are the most manipulated at that moment, because they have nowhere to run to, nowhere to turn to, and they're not on their P's and Q's. And so because they have had this emotional experience with God or at church or wherever the case is, now they feel like Jesus is the answer for everything because of that emotional experience. And they don't mind being sheeple and gullible because of that feeling, because of that experience. And they will turn off and shut off the critical side of their brain and will just submit to God any way how possible. Now, somebody in my comment section has said that the government has found Noah's Ark. Let's deal with it though. All right, because first off, how in the world did Noah's Ark even happen, right? Now, the Bible stories did not happen. The Bible stories are mythological. I just need people to understand that, please. Thank you. It's even funnier because the people of early times, the early churches, and people of the ancient times did not even take the Bible stories literal. For whatever reason, we're supposed to be in this high-tech, advanced time, and we're taking these Bible stories literal. I don't know how you could take somebody being in the belly of a whale for 3 days and take that literal. I don't know how you think somebody walking on water and resurrected from the dead, and you take that literal. I don't know. But please, it doesn't logically make sense for somebody to have a boat and be on that boat, mind you, not for just 40 days and 40 nights. He was on that boat for months. And I need you to understand that there's no possible way for Noah to have the capacity to have two of every animal on a boat, and then for months not only maintain those animals on that boat, but all the waste from those animals, the animals also have to eat. And not only that, but most animals on that boat might eat the other animals. So how in the world do you come to the conclusion that there was a Noah's Ark, that there was a Noah's flood? I even dealt with the Noah's flood in the reel, if y'all haven't seen the reel, but I just thought it was just very, very interesting that the all-knowing God who knows everything, right? This all-knowing God knows everything, all the ins and outs of everything that's going to happen in the world, and yet he wouldn't make some goddamn female angels for his sons. How you gonna make your sons and ain't gonna give them no pussy? That don't make sense. That's not clicking to me. How in the world are you going to have some sons and you already know their desires? You instill the desires in them. They are reflections of you. And yet you won't give them some pussy? You knew. But here's the thing, right? I only say that you knew because they will create this narrative that God knows all the ins and outs and he knows everything. He's all knowing. I will argue that God is not all knowing, because somebody who is all knowing won't be jealous. Somebody who is all-knowing won't be filled with rage, filled with wrath. Somebody who is all-knowing won't be so quick to kill, steal, and destroy. Somebody who is all-knowing won't be regretful. How could you be all-knowing and then in the Bible it tells you, and God had a heavy grief in his heart? God has a heart? No, you don't understand, Tyrone. They're speaking metaphorically. Metaphorically, he had a heart. Oh, now we're speaking in metaphors. now it's metaphoric. That wasn't literal. now all of a sudden we can't take the Bible literal. Tells you in the Bible that God is a man of war. It don't mean literally, Tyrone. It's so funny how they'll pick and choose what makes sense, what's literal, and then what's not literal. That be making me laugh. You know. Somebody said, "What happens when we die?" I don't know. I haven't died. I haven't died yet, so I can't tell you what happens when we die. I can give you my personal perspective on what may happen in the afterlife. I personally believe in the afterlife. Whatever we choose to believe is the afterlife, what happens in the afterlife. You know, I told one of my female friends who's a Christian, and I told her, I'm like, if an old lady feel like the afterlife or heaven for her is baking some chocolate chip cookies for the rest of her life, that's going to be heaven for her. And she'll be in her little nice kitchen baking cookies for the rest of her afterlife, because that's what she might deem to be the afterlife. If a person feel like you going out, they go into a buffet, and every time they get done with food, some new set of food come out, and that's just how their afterlife is. That might be the afterlife for them. If the afterlife for you is playing life like a Sims game, or going to different planets like a Star Wars or Star Trek, that's what I deem the afterlife is. Just basically you living outside of the boundaries of how when you was on Earth. Those who have seen Lovecraft, there's this episode where one of the main characters, they were going to different planets with their husband, you know what I'm saying, and just fighting crime and doing different things and going through time. That could be the afterlife. And then, but if you also believe that nothing happens in the afterlife, this is where I feel like it gets dangerous too. Because if you feel like nothing happens in the afterlife, maybe you don't go anywhere in the afterlife. That would be terrible. If you feel like nothing happens in the afterlife, I feel like that's the true meaning of hell. Because imagine you die, you go into the afterlife, and it's just darkness and nobody's there. You know what I'm saying? That's terrible. So I rather believe, at least I'll have my own perspective of the afterlife. You know what I'm saying? I have my own perspective. I believe the afterlife is what you make it out to be. So for me, I feel like I can be able to travel to different dimensions and different aspects of life itself and enjoy myself. You know what I'm saying? I feel like the afterlife is like the dream world. His most rhetorical character is once God doesn't maintain, this character can't remain God. His most rhetorical character is once God doesn't maintain, this character can't remain. I don't understand that one. Wait, break that down for me. Another shock. Are you dealing with Sodom and Gomorrah? Who's going to tell him? And listen, for people who come to my platform and to my page, and if you're listening to my podcast episode, I don't mind you submitting yourself to a religion, to a God. I don't mind that. You know what I'm saying? Do what works for you. But I need you to also understand, and I need you also to come to an understanding that your perception of God is just your perception, and your idea and ideology of God is just your idea and ideology of God. I need you to just thoroughly understand that every day. Understand that just because you believe in Jesus doesn't make Jesus real. Just because a whole mass of people believe in Jesus does not make Jesus real. Because I want to give you a little insight. I'm going to give you a little news flash, and this might ruffle a few feathers, maybe the whole feather, maybe the whole wing. But the Jesus that you believe in is the Antichrist. Uh-oh. The Jesus that you believe in is the Antichrist, because when you read the book of Revelations, the Antichrist is supposed to be somebody who is physically supposed to be on earth. Supposed to be a whole mass of people that's supposed to follow him. And when you study this metaphor, this analogy of the Antichrist, and even when studying the sayings of Jesus, that the false Messiah is the person that they will tell you, oh, here is the Messiah. There is the Messiah. And what Jesus was pointing out was that the Messiah is not a person that you're going to be able to observe. He told you that the kingdom of God cannot be with observation. And if the kingdom can't be seen with observation, what makes you think the king can't be seen with observation? People were waiting for a king, for a Messiah. And this is what the Jews believe, right? In this story, in this mythology, even some Jews today believe that there's going to be some type of physical messianic figure coming to save them. And this is what you need to understand. There is not going to be a Jesus to save your black ass. That has to be understood. The Antichrist is the one that you keep saying is coming back. The Antichrist is the one that you keep telling people to submit and repent to. The Antichrist is the one that you keep telling people to give their life to. The Jesus that is hanging up in your grandmother's living room is the Antichrist. But he's black, Tyrone. Jesus on my grandmother's wall is black. Well, he's the Antichrist too. He sure is. The Jesus that you've been raised up to believe in, the Jesus that when you close your eyes and you hear the word Jesus and that image pop up in your head, that's the Antichrist. Because when you hear the word Jesus, it doesn't matter how you put it. It doesn't matter what you keep telling yourself. The moment that you hear the word Jesus, you see a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned, buttermilk complexion man. That's what you see. And I know that because that's what I see. You can say Yahshua, and then you're going to see a black man with an afro or some jerry curls. Either way, those figures are the Antichrist. Now, on the flip side, they don't have to be the Antichrist. Those figures could just be aspects of yourself. On the flip side, when you truly understand the Christ figure and what plays into the character of who Jesus is in the story of Jesus, you'll then understand that you are Jesus and that the Christ figure is just your soul, your spirit, in the journey that it has to go through. That the whole story of Christ in the crucifixion and the resurrection is just basically a duplication, or I won't even say a duplication, but it's just signifying your hero's journey. In the gospel, in the Gnostic gospels, in the gospel of Philip, to paraphrase it, it says that if you believe that Jesus died and resurrected, you're in error. You got it all wrong. You got it all twisted, because the true meaning of Christ, the true message of Christ is not that he died and resurrected, but that he resurrected and then died. And what does that mean? It means that the true story and the true perception and meaning of Christ is that you have to raise up the Christ within yourself. You have to be the walking resurrection of Christ. You have to cast forth your light to the world before you leave this earth. And that's all that means. But see, the reason why I say that the Jesus that the Christian churches are given to the world, the reason why I say that's the Antichrist is because they always talking about what's the physical. Why they always talk about everything that is spiritual. And don't get it wrong, don't get it twisted. There are some good churches out there. There might be some good pastors out there that give out good information, but they always focus on Jesus coming back. Didn't Jesus tell you my kingdom is not of this world? That's what he said. So why would he use this foundation, this platform, to rule? He said, my kingdom will not be seen with observation, and my kingdom is not of this world. That should tell you well enough where Christ resides and where his kingdom resides. And if the kingdom can't be seen with observation, what the hell makes you think the king can? So you need to understand, while the church is giving you the Antichrist and the false Messiah and telling you he's coming back real soon and you needs to get ready, the true message, the true gospel is that you are a pure being who have the light. You are a pure, sanctified, righteous being, and you are just as perfect as God. You are just as pure as God. Not the flesh. We are not talking about your physical self. We're talking about your spirit, your soul that comes from the significant one, the supreme intelligence. And the more that you identify with the God within yourself, the better of a person you're going to be. Man cannot serve two masters, so he must become his own. But what religion has done, what Christianity has done, what a lot of these Christians have done is that they have made you to focus more on the condemnation instead of the sanctification. And so while you focusing on being a low down, just low down, dirty sinner, and we just have this sinful nature, Jesus will always tell people, go and sin no more. In the Gnostic Gospels, the disciples asked Jesus, what's the sin in this world? Tell us what's the greatest of the sin. What is sin? And Jesus like, fool, there is no sin. Sin is an illusion. Whatever you call sin, sin is all wrapped up in your head. That's what it is. And the more that you deem sin to not have any type of effect or any type of power over you, the more that you can get back in contact with the one that is within you, with your higher self, and align your lower self with your higher self to be your best self. But a lot of people, like I said, are still focusing on looking for a man in the sky. That is the Antichrist. I just need to keep reiterating that. That is the Antichrist. Jesus is not coming back. There is not going to be any physical second coming. There's not going to be a rapture. the one that you have to bring back into your life is the one from within. That is the one that will save you. That is your savior. That is your redeemer. You have to redeem yourself. Not a God, not a savior, not any type of entity that they will try to sell you. But you know what's funny? The Bible, Jesus warns his disciples about this, that there will come a time. And it's so interesting how beautifully put is put in these analogies and in this mythology, that Jesus said there will come a time where people will tell you, here's the Messiah, there's the Messiah. And that's what you see in the church today, is that they're telling you that they have Jesus. You need to find Jesus. I got Jesus. You need to find Jesus. Get in contact with this Jesus. Let me pray for you so you can get in unionship with Jesus. And all these churches, millions of people, are feeding into a false Messiah. Another aspect I want to deal with religion, right? Because somebody had put a comment saying the sex without marriage is a sin, or that's what they say in the Bible, and you're saying that you violated that rule. Somebody said pork is sinful. Well, I'm gonna eat me some baby back ribs tonight, so sorry for breaking that rule. But the purpose of, and I think I already broke this down, is that, you know, in ancient times, people would oracally break down religion, and they would break down the gods and goddesses, and they would encode their ideologies and all these different regulations in stories, you know, and basically people took those scripts and they used it in a way to manipulate the masses, and for people to historicalize it and take it literal. And I would bet on it that when they started to print out the Bible, because people might have been able to easily take upon the mystical aspects of the Bible, they immediately historicalized the Bible and just basically distracted the whole masses and audience of people. And while they over here is historicalizing it, the people who truly understand the Bible already know that the Bible isn't to be taken literal. And when you really study all different myths and you study all the different stories that there are out there, I don't know how you could really circle back to the Bible and think that Jesus was an actual literal character, or any of the biblical characters in there for that matter. From Jonah to Moses to Adam and Eve to Abraham. And Abraham is just a play off of Brahma. I don't want to hear that one, but people are scared to go deeper than the Bible. And the reason for that is because a lot of people are scared to confront their shadow. They are scared to confront that which they don't know, and that which they deeply do know, but they don't want to confront it because they fear more of the what if. And people feel like to have doubt and to be skeptical is something of the devil. And I'll never forget, and I think I've talked about this in previous podcast episodes, that when I would go to church, I remember hearing the pastor talk about how he was going through the channels and he had clicked on the history channel, and the history channel had this question on whether or not the Bible was credible, or whether or not there was a God. And he was like, he just turned it on to another channel because he was not going to let the devil get into his head. Ain't that something? I love you too, Miss Sexy. But ain't that something that the pastor could not handle the question on whether or not there was a God, could not handle whether or not the Bible was a credible source, because he didn't want any type of doubt to play into his mind. But if you know something, even when I was a Christian, I would listen to atheists for fun because I already knew what the truth was. And if I was to have doubt about something, then that's not on them, that's on me. You see what I'm saying? And so if you can't listen to the opposition, if you can't listen to different things outside of yourself, I would have to question your foundation. And the reason why I could listen to anybody and everybody, and I can have these sit downs and I can have these talks, is because I don't fear nothing. I don't have nothing to defend because I don't have anything to defend for. I'm omniist. I'm willing to take all different aspects. So I don't have this foundation on believing in a savior or in a God, or, standing 10 toes down on something. You know? But I'm gonna be wrapping it up because I told myself I wasn't gonna be on here for an hour, but here I am, on here for about an hour. Somebody said in the comments, if the Bible is so fake, why is the Antichrist government system trying to destroy? Even told us they are expecting outside force to invade 2030. Well, first of all, I didn't say the Bible is fake. I said the Bible is mythical, and it's a mythological book. Now, mythological and fake are not the same thing. Why? Because for something to be fake has no value to it. For something to be mythical has very much value to it. Because when you decode and analyze that which is mythical, you can supply it you can apply it to your life. So the Bible is full of myths that are just talking about yourself. Now, as when you're dealing with the Bible or you're dealing with the government expecting something to evade in 2030, that's what we call predictive programming. That has nothing to do with something being prophetic or anything of that nature. That's just predictive programming. They did the same thing in 2020 with COVID. I didn't want to believe it, but a lot of people were saying 2020 something going to happen. And I'm like, oh, here y'all go again with these conspiracies. But here we are. If something does happen in 2030, it ain't because the Bible predicted it. The Bible is a spell book. Somebody said that they look at the Bible as a grimoire or a spell book. In some aspects, the Bible is a spell book. But I'm going to end it off here. Hopefully, I put out a lot of great information for a lot of people who are listening to this in terms of the podcast, whether you're listening to this on Spotify or watching this on Instagram or YouTube, you are very, very much appreciated for all the people who be listening and taking the time out to listen to your boy over here. So, thank y'all for listening and watching, and, share this podcast episode with a couple of your people. This will spark up maybe some really good conversations with, people who might, be on that middle ground of like, they have little questions about religion, but they're too scared to ask anybody because they don't want nobody judging them. Or maybe they have, a huge amount of skepticism about what they've been raised up to believe in. All these sorts of things, leave your comments below. Hit me up on Instagram. I'll be happy to have, a conversation or really dispute different things with you and stuff like that. Cause I've been there, you know what I'm saying? But hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, we out.